Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing really well. Back today to do my little check-in, a weekly check-in to catch you all up on the books that I've been reading this week. I decided last week that this would be a good little format to be going forward with while a lot of my living stuff is still a little bit up in the air, but I'm still wanting to keep my toe in booktube. And actually, I'm really pleased to say that I've finished quite a few books this week. Starting off, I just had about 60-80 pages left of Good Spirits by Borison to finish off at the end of last week. And indeed, I was able to get to the end of this. This is a contemporary kind of supernatural romance between a ghost of Christmas past and a modern day woman, where our main character Nolan has always been assigned to obviously quite dastardly evil people, and he has from the 1st of December to the 24th to kind of show them their pasts, see the error of their ways so that he can pass them on to the ghost of Christmas present. However, when he is assigned to Harriet York, he's a little bit confused because she seems to be a pretty good person. So he can't quite work out why it is that she needs haunting. And various twists and turns along the way, secrets are uncovered. And of course, because it's a romance, they start to fall in love. And yeah, I still feel like I did at the end of last week, which is, this is perfectly fine. It's not really anything special, and I did find some inconsistencies with the historical aspect of Nolan. I feel like the resolution to their love story was just kind of there. I don't necessarily feel like this is a story or a process that has been really thought through. But you know, it was some nice light Christmassy fare that kind of gets you in the mood of the season. So thank you very much, Borison. Moving on to the next one. You'll see that I am just fully embracing the Christmas fare. And the next thing that I finished was A Christmas Ghost Story by Duffy. So Duffy is known for writing one of these little ditty Christmas poems each year. They're always illustrated by different people, my favourite of which being The Christmas Truce. This particular one is illustrated by Vivian Mildenberger, and in this we do have another haunting. The ghost of a lady called Sarah Whitehead who comes to a billionaire and haunts him, teaching him of the evils of corporate greed and her wanting to take revenge for the death of her brother. You know, this is good fun. Do I necessarily feel like it was worth the $12.99 that I paid for it? Maybe not. Sorry, we're getting into some interesting light situation right now. No, that's worse. That's just worse. But I don't know, it just feels like a tradition. Every single year I have to pick up one of these. The illustrations are always lovely. This has quite a bleak colour palette, but every now and then you'll get these shocks of red. Look at that. And ooh. So you know what, it hit the spot. Is it like the most gripping Christmas story that I've read? Not really, because they're always kind of over before you've even kind of got your head around them. But I suppose for a Christmas tradition, I'm happy to have picked this up. Okay, we're shifting here so that we do not get so much in the sun. I then, as part of my rereads project, ended up listening to the audio of The Book Thief, which I read for the first time at the beginning of 2014. I always say it was the book that got me back into reading, and then I proceeded to not read it again until 2020. When I reread it with Shah over at Thoroughly Enjoyed Books, and we both really enjoyed that experience. And now, as part of my rereads project, where I'm going back over old favourites to work out whether or not my favourite books are indeed my favourite books, do they stack up next to each other, I have come round to The Book Thief again. I will definitely have more thoughts on this book to come and how it holds up on a third read, but I do always enjoy being back in this world. It just kind of reminds me of being 18 and reading it for the first time, and kind of the headspace I was in then. But I also feel like if you haven't read The Book Thief for a while, you might find it quite pertinent now. You know, a lot of these books just become a little bit more relevant as you get older. I certainly feel like that's the case with The Book Thief. And then the final book that I finished this week is Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. So I originally started reading this back in August when I went on holiday. However, I didn't get very far, probably about 50 pages or so, ended up putting it down for about 2 months. And then I decided to pick it back up and start from the beginning. This is historical fiction set in Victorian London in 1862. And we start off introduced to this orphan girl, Sutrinda, who has been brought up among this den of thieves, raised by a woman called Mrs. Suxby. And despite being surrounded by criminals, she's always led pretty much a sheltered life. Mrs. Suxby has always taken very good care of her and has been very protective of her. However, one day when she is 17, a man known to the family as Gentleman comes to their den and invites Sue in on a scheme. There is a young woman around Sue's age who lives a very secluded life in a manor, being looked after by her uncle, who basically keeps her under lock and key. However, she is sitting on a large fortune as part of her dowry, and Gentleman's plan is that he is going to train Sue up to be her maid, and with Sue at the manor, speaking honeyed words into the lady who we come to know is Maud, into her ear about Gentleman, then Maud will be persuaded to elope with Gentleman, and once the two of them have eloped and are married, Gentleman and Sue will throw her her into an asylum and pocket her fortune for themselves. However, as Sue starts to learn more about Maud and spends more time with her, they seem to be developing a very deep bond and connection, and Sue is starting to doubt whether or not she can go ahead with this scheme. Now, that is not the whole story. There are many twists and turns throughout this book. This is my very first Sarah Waters book, and I will say it is incredibly atmospheric, and it does feel very much like a Victorian fiction, however with a lot more focus and acknowledgement on more taboo subjects that wouldn't necessarily have been deemed appropriate to talk about in the Victorian period. It's a lot more violent and grisly. There is more talk about sexual relationships and particularly erotica. And then we have the central relationship between Sue and Maud, where they initially start off as maid and lady, but start to have more romantic and sexual attraction towards each other. And as I say, it is an incredibly atmospheric, very immersive book, full of lots of twists and turns. However, one criticism I will have of this book is that I do feel like it was a little bit too slow paced for my liking. I know this book is very much wanting to emulate Dickens, but do we really need to act as if we are also being paid by the word? Maybe not, maybe that was unnecessary. It is very slow paced. It is also quite repetitive because we start off having the perspective of Sue, and then in part 2 we get another person's perspective, and we are basically seeing all of the events that Sue told from this person's perspective, and I just didn't feel like that was very necessary. I felt a lot of the time like I was going, come on, speed up, we already know this. It is interesting to get this person's perspective, but it does drag the plot to a halt. And I didn't feel like it was entirely necessary to recount the entirety of part 1 through this person's eyes. There are a lot of twists and turns in here, and that definitely does pull you through the book, even though I did feel at some points like, come on, let's just pick it up. Definitely keen to read more Sarah Waters, so if you have any recommendations, do let me know. I do feel like she is very skilled at evoking that sense of the 19th century, and though I haven't read anything else from her, this might be a good place to start if you've never read from her before. I am currently in the middle of a different kind of book, a very British Christmas, Your Festive Survival Guide by Rob Temple. As I say, I've been very much in a Christmassy mood, and this is just a witty little book, very much geared towards being a gift book, going through all of the different features that make up a British Christmas, basically from August when you first start seeing mince pies in the shops, I presume all the way up to either Christmas Day or New Year's Day, all of the trials and tribulations that you might find if you are having Christmas over here, packed full of wit and humour and a lot of British awkwardness. It is very funny, and I'm about halfway through and really enjoying it so far. And then to close off the weekly check-in, I did want to show you a book that I received. It's the only book that I've hauled so far this week, and it was actually sent to me by a publisher, Head of Zeus, who sent me The Story of Tudor Art, A History of Tudor England Through Its Art and Objects by Christina Faraday, which is an absolutely stunning art history, which includes integrated images. You know how much I love integrated images. And this is going through textiles, household objects, ceramics, as well as portraiture to build up this real vivid, detailed history of art in the Tudor world, and not just looking at royals and nobles, but also what we can glean of more middle class people. I don't imagine there's going to be a whole lot to say about working class people in their art, because I feel a lot of it might not have survived, but it's trying to be a little bit more of an inclusive depiction of Tudor art rather than portraits of the court. A lot of the time when people think about Tudor art, they're thinking of Hans Holbein, who is incredible, and I can also recommend Fanny Moyle's biography if you are interested in that. But there is much more to the story than that, and I'm very much looking forward to picking this up and getting to look at some of the absolutely beautiful imagery in here. So at a future date, I'll be able to check back in on this and let you know my thoughts. So there we go, that is everything that I have for this week in terms of what I've been reading, the kind of books that I've been thinking about. Please do let me know if you've read any of the books that I've spoken about today. Alternatively, please let me know about what you've been reading and enjoying. I would love to hear from you. I hope you're having a fantastic day, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.